Sometimes when you hear people talk about the craft, they quote a line in Wicca that says, "And it harm none, do what you will." It's called the Wiccan Rede. Occasionally, I will take exception to this, only because frequently the way it is employed is as if there's a rule about how you can work your magic. So as long as there's no attack magic, as long as you're not hexing people, as long as you do what we say, do what you want. It's that frame of mind when it's imposed on others that I take exception to, because that's not the rule. I've got a couple different lectures on this, so I don't want to belabor the point, but the rule is do what you will. You're free to do what you will in the craft. But I don't disagree with the sentiment behind it. It's basically talking about the golden rule. The golden rule is a magical tool that we can use. The way that it can be a magical tool is illustrated in a story about a farmer who won the top prize for his corn at the state fair every single year. There was a reporter who was curious about this farmer's consistent success who interviewed him and asked, "What's your secret?" The reporter was surprised at the response. The farmer said that he shared all of his best seed corn with all of his neighbor farmers. The reporter asked, "Why would you give away such a valuable resource?" And the farmer said, "The wind carries pollen from field to field. And if my neighbors grew poor quality corn, it would hurt my crop. In order for me to grow good corn, I must help my neighbors to grow good corn too." This story is a wonderful example of how the golden rule is magical. Not when used as a moralism. The Wiccan Rede is often a moralistic thing telling us how to live our lives. But when you look at it out of self-interest, it's very magical, because it teaches us how generosity isn't really just simply an act of kindness in a vacuum. It's a strategy for personal and mutual success. Helping others ultimately benefits us along with everybody else. Whether it's sharing resources or knowledge or support, generosity builds our own prosperity, builds our own power, builds our own happiness. And as an added byproduct, builds trust and collaboration and good relationships with others. Usually when people talk about the golden rule, they talk about it as something that you should do to be a better person. And from a craft point of view, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But really, if it's not effective magically, it doesn't really have a place in one's practice, whatever it is. Anything that doesn't have an effect magically doesn't have a place in your practice if you want to be a powerful, successful magical practitioner. That's the litmus test that I always use. Does it work? When something proves itself to me as being a powerful magical tool, then it does make a difference for me. At the heart of that farmer's story lies the timeless principle of the golden rule. And the golden rule is stated, treat others as you want to be treated. The simple truth about this spans all cultures. There's a version of it in every culture you can find. But we have to understand that it's not a moral guideline first and foremost. It's a practice rooted in self-interest. And self-interest is not a bad thing. Self-interest is not selfishness. It's very important to understand that if it's truly self-interest, helps everybody. But it does call for treating others how you want to be treated, because there is no separation between us and others. The idea of others is an ego-based idea. To think that there are separations between me and other people, separation between me and the Creator. That's the basis of the entire ego thought system. It stems from that one thought, I am separate. The golden rule, when you state it, treat others as you want to be treated, sounds so easy. It's just like, oh, that's easy. I could do that, until you try to apply it. And then it can be surprisingly tricky. And why do you think this is? We often prioritize our egos. And remember that the ego sees other people as obstacles or means. The ego sees other people as a means to an end or as an obstacle to its own preservation or success. It doesn't see other people as an extension of ourselves. And one of the major obstacles to practicing the golden rule is this ego activity. And one of the basic ego activities is that of projection. Projection, as I'm talking about it here, means when we see something that we don't like within ourselves and assign it to other people. So if we're calling them selfish, if we're calling them arrogant, while believing that we are virtuous and kind, this is creating a harmful narrative within ourselves. I'm good and the world is full of problems. And this is the ego's tactic to keep us separate, stuck, and unhappy. It's all about them and how bad they are, and if it wasn't for them, we'd be okay. The ego loves to turn that on ourselves as well. That's just par for the course, because the ego's main function is to self-destruct. But as far as keeping everybody else out there, it uses projection to do that. You're unsafe because of all of them. Projection is the opposite of the golden rule. And the golden rule says, if I give you what I want for myself, I will have it. Projection says, if I give to you, I lose it. When we give from an ego point of view, we lose. What you give to another is gone. You lost it. In truth, if you're understanding things from the point of view of the soul, what you give expands. Everything you give to yourself. If I give you anything, I'm actually giving it to myself, and the act of giving it is expanding it. The ego definitely doesn't want to look at that idea. For one thing, it can't comprehend it. And for another thing, it sees that, and rightfully so, as being a threat to its survival, because it is. When you recognize that whatever you give expands and you give it to yourself, the idea of separation is cracked open. It's destroyed somewhat. The ego insists that the golden rule is for fools. It's for those who choose selflessness so that they can be taken advantage by others. The ego's point of view is that everyone is out to get you, and that's because the ego is out to get everyone. So how do we overcome this? How do we overcome this? We have to understand that it's all a matter of perception and perspective. Rather than being preoccupied with other people's flaws, we start to learn about our shared humanity. And we start to learn when we see other people's flaws and judge them as being bad, it's because we see ourselves as being bad. Now, maybe not exactly in the way that we see them as being bad, because that would be too easy. We wouldn't be able to be snowed by the ego so well if it was so obvious. Exactly what I see in that person is what I don't like about myself. It's not usually that cut and dry. It's the idea that their flaws are bad, when in reality, their flaws are a cry for help. The most horrible, horrendous behavior in the world is a cry for help. And us projecting onto them our own self-hatred, our own self-loathing, doesn't help them and it doesn't help us. So it's not that you want to practice the golden rule because then you're going to be a, quote, better person. We practice the golden rule for some magically astute reasons. On a very practical level, we do it because it gives us what we want. On another level, it also gives the world what it needs. It starts to allow us to see people as either being happy or ill rather than good or bad. If somebody's in the throes of a physical disease, we might feel bad for them, but we don't hate them for it usually. We don't say, oh, that evil person, how dare they have cancer? Who do they think they are? Who do they think they are being epileptic? Get away from me. God, I hate you. We don't do that. But when somebody's exhibiting a personality disorder, when somebody's exhibiting mental or emotional illness, societal illness, they're evil. They're bad. Projection is an effective tool for the ego because people exhibit bad behavior all the time. It's what we do here. And the ego loves to use everybody else's bad behavior to keep us miserable. to keep us stuck. If we started to use the golden rule to heal ourselves and free ourselves from those misperceptions, and we started getting the benefits from it, the ego would cease to have any real function in our lives. We'd see it for what it is. It's not necessarily that the ego just goes away one day. It's just that you see it for what it is. It's a thought system based on separation that we all are in a habit of using. And when we're no longer controlled by it, it's just there. But we don't allow it to be the boss anymore. And one of the ways that we don't allow it to be the boss anymore is to use a tool such as the golden rule. And look at how our behavior changes naturally when we start using the golden rule. We start letting go of these kinds of judgments and start approaching other people with empathy, including the people that we used to hate so much, including the people that cause so much pain in people's lives. Now, I'm not going to go over and over again like I've done many, many times in saying that doesn't mean that we put up with abusive behavior. It doesn't mean that we stop putting people in prison. It doesn't mean that we stop using restraining orders and all of that. But we do it out of empathy, just like we put people in quarantine when they're contagious. Same thing here. It's not that we're putting people in quarantine because they are evil people that need to be destroyed. It's because they're sick. And so we do that sometimes with people who are exhibiting dangerous behavior. But the difference with us when we start employing the golden rule is that we see it with empathy and compassion rather than this desire to attack and destroy. And why that's important for us practically is because then we're no longer attacking and destroying ourselves. It's very practical, and it must be done out of self-interest first, or it has no staying power. If you don't see the benefit of doing this for yourself in practical terms, it won't have any staying power. It's just a thing that you try. It's just an interesting idea. But if the golden rule is something that you learn how to employ and you get practical benefit from it consistently, then it's something that you start to use on a daily basis. The added benefit of that is that it helps on a global level, not just personal. But it's got to be done out of personal self-interest first, or it really doesn't make that big of a difference. If you look at how universal the golden rule is and how ancient it is, in Christianity, it was talked about, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In Buddhism, it was talked about, hurt not others in ways that you would find hurtful. In Judaism, what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow man. That is the entire law. All the rest is commentary. In Islam, no one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself. A Course in Miracles, when you meet anyone, remember it is a holy encounter. As you see him, you will see yourself. As you treat him, you will treat yourself. Wiccan Rede, do what you will and harm none. These are constant reiterations of the same magical formula over and over again. And it reminds us that kindness and empathy transcend all of the apparent cultural and religious differences. It's a place where everything really does come together, which is the whole idea of the golden rule. It starts to collapse this idea of separation. But despite its universality, living by the golden rule is not easy in this world. The ego usually fuels frustration and anger and drives us to prioritize our own ego-based desires over the well-being of others. And it's trying to do that in order that we don't have well-being for ourselves. It's super tricky the way it does it. It's very sly. It wants to destroy us, and it snows us. It convinces us that it's doing it to protect ourselves from them. But it's doing it ultimately as a tool of self-destruction. The idea of this, the whole mindset of this, leads to conflict and harm in very extreme forms sometimes. Whenever we have those kinds of struggles externally, we have to remind ourselves that that mirrors an internal struggle. And that when we can, on the external, display compassion and do unto others as we would have them do to us, we resolve that inner conflict. And when we resolve that inner conflict, the results of that inner conflict are gone. And that's why there's so much practical benefit. That's why when people really start to use this tool, they start having prosperity, They get out of debt. They heal diseases. All kinds of cool stuff can happen. And I'm not promising anything specific in your situation, but these are the kinds of things that are constantly reported by people who employ this as a magical tool rather than a moralistic notion. Living by the golden rule. It requires us to win the internal battle that we've been describing here, to choose empathy over judgment, to choose generosity over selfishness, unity over division. And these choices don't usually come easily, at least not at first, but they are worthwhile because we realize the practical benefit. We realize what we're really doing after we do it enough. We're not just being, quote, better people, because that's the ego. That's the way that the ego wants to separate you even more. It'll use the golden rule to say, look how much better you are than all of them. It's the same thing. It's the same ego-driven thought system in new drag. When the ego uses the golden rule, it's to separate you from people because it's not truly the golden rule. Look how good you are. Those people are awful and you still are nice to them? Wow, you're better. We have to be aware of that when we start doing this. We're not doing it for them. We're doing it for us. And that's a good thing. That's exactly what Spirit wants. Spirit wants us to do it for us because Spirit understands that there is no them. When you do it for us, you do it for them. But if you're always doing it for them, you're reinforcing the idea of them. You're still projecting. So it's not always simple. It's not always easy to do this, to come from the point of view of I'm going to do unto others as I want them to do to me. But when we understand the esoteric principle behind it and the practical, magical benefits of it, it's a whole different ballgame because then we're not playing in the realms of I'm more spiritual than you are. The golden rule profoundly transforms us. And when it profoundly transforms us, it automatically transforms our relationships and then transforms our communities and then transforms our globe. So many people who are running around like chickens with their heads chopped off saying, oh, this world is horrible, this world is horrible, don't understand that they're part of the problem. When we get into a relaxed state of mind and understand, oh, I see, I have a lot of power here. I have a lot of power to dissolve this idea of separation within my own mind. And since all minds are joined, I have a lot of power to create healing on a global level. People are always saying, what kind of spell can I do to heal the world? Well, there it is. You start at home. You start right now with the people in your life. And you say, how am I treating others the way I want to be treated? Not only in action, but in my mind. And you're not always going to do a great job of it, and that's okay. It takes practice, just like anything else. And you can practice with the people in your own life, and you can also practice with people in the media. It's great to practice with people in the media because the media all have these ideas that are being thrown out at us as who do we hate today? Who do we hate today? You can see everybody gloms onto it. Oh yeah, we all hate them. We're all going to hate them together. We have good reasons to hate them. Look what they did. Look what they're doing. Horrible people. When you either participate in those discussions or when you participate even in your mind, yeah, I hate them. What you're doing is you're reinforcing the very problem that you're running around saying, oh, can we have a spell to heal the world? So instead, you learn how to say, okay, I am going to see them as the innocent child of the universe, and I'm going to give them grace. I don't understand everything. I don't know what's going on. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. I don't understand where they're coming from. I don't understand the story as much as I think I do. All I'm here to do is to look at them as the innocent child of the universe that they are and let their story play out in its own way without reinforcing the narrative that they're separate, that they're bad. It's not only opening the door for somebody at Starbucks. I mean, that's nice, but that's that old Lily Tomlin line, smiling at someone with your lips and squinting at them with your heart. And you don't want to smile on the outside while you have hateful thoughts about other people because somehow you think I'm being, quote, nice. What we want instead is to recognize we are in a huge spiritual undertaking here. Every single person who's been incarnated has decided to undertake a huge spiritual journey. It's a massive task that we've taken on by being here. Let's not waste it by falling into the same ego patterns. It's easy to do that. It's not that you're bad when you do that. It's actually the easiest thing in the world. But it's not about doing things that are easy all the time. Sometimes we have to do the things that are hard. And the hardest things to do are not things that we do with our body, but things we do with our mind and things we do with our heart. To choose to find compassion and empathy for people who are exhibiting behavior that we don't agree with is one of the most challenging things that we can do in this world. But it also holds the greatest impact, not only for ourselves practically, but for the entire globe. We do have power. We're so powerless. We're so powerless here. Everybody that's powerful pull all the strings and we're just nothing. Don't buy it. Don't buy that narrative. You have all the power of the entire universe at your disposal. And how you use that power is up to you. Whether you want to just go with the status quo and say, yes, I hate them, or yes, they're bad. I'm going to create separation after separation in my mind in order that I be on the right side of an argument. Or we can say instead, I don't understand what any of this is. And my only job here, my only function here is to love them, regardless of what their actions are. And I want to reiterate that does not mean being a doormat. It does not mean putting up with their bad behavior. In fact, we have a whole bunch of lectures on that. If you think that that's what this is, go listen to those, the power of no, etc. There's all kinds of stuff you can do in the world to put up healthy boundaries and to say no to bad behavior. But it has nothing to do with your heart and the way that you choose whether or not you're going to have compassion and empathy. So the next time you feel so powerless in this world, ask yourself, how much am I willing to employ the golden rule internally in my heart and bless and love the people that I am seeing as being so evil? That whole idea of loving your enemies. You don't love your enemies because then you're going to get to heaven in the afterlife. Don't do anything because you're going to get to heaven in the afterlife. Living in the future is not powerful. You do it because it works now. You do it out of self-interest. You do it because it makes you feel better. You do it because it makes your life better. Your life thrives in an internal atmosphere of love and compassion and empathy. That's how the spirit thrives here. And as an added bonus, you then become one of the forces of healing on the planet that turns things around in dramatic ways that people don't think possible. Next time you feel powerless, ask yourself, how am I with the golden rule today? How can I use the golden rule in this situation where I'm feeling so powerless against these big, giant powers that be outside of me? Once you employ that, you'll realize I've been snowed. I believed my ego this whole time that I'm a little nothing and that they're big and powerful. I've just proven that I have power in this situation. And it's the power of choice, the power of decision. I'm deciding in the moment. Am I going to employ the ego or am I going to employ the soul? Because you can't do both at the same time. But when you employ the soul, and the ego dissolves, you realize this really is an illusion, this world. It really is an illusion. Look what I just did. I just melted that whole situation in front of my face. The idea that this world is nothing but an illusion, the ego uses to make you feel bad about yourself or to make you feel superior to other people. The idea that this world is an illusion, when the ego takes it, when somebody's having a bad experience, oh, it's just an illusion. That's the ego's use of that idea. It's being used as a weapon to make them feel bad, to make them powerless. Well, it's just an illusion. That's not helpful. But when you use the golden rule in the moment to open your own heart, you realize that it is an illusion because you just melted the illusion right in front of your face. Those people are no longer your enemy. Those people are either your friend or a friend in potential who's in a very sick state right now. And that your condemnation of them is not helping. But when you employ the golden rule, you are not only helping yourself, but ultimately you are helping them in ways that you may not comprehend. Thank you so very much for joining me today. Until next time, blessed be.